Let's bring in Hollywood divorce attorney David Glass for more on this. David?
People going through divorces are going through some of the hardest times of their lives, and a lot of what they're going through is emotional. And in any divorce, there's a huge sense of loss, and loss of relationship, of money, some friends. Did you know that more than 50% of all marriages end in divorce? Staggering statistic, to be sure. Divorce is arguably one of the most difficult of all life's major transitions. When it comes to divorce, over the past 25 years, I've seen it all. Whether you're thinking about or preparing for divorce, in the midst of one, or trying to move on from one, our show is for you. Welcome to the Hourglass, where family law and psychology intersect. I'm your host, celebrity divorce attorney David Glass, a certified family law specialist, former psychologist, and the author of Moving On, Redesigning Your Emotional, Financial, and Social Life After Divorce. My show is devoted to bringing insight, clarity, and comfort to those who are about to go through divorce, those who are in the middle of one, or trying to come out the other side of one. These are the same ideas I cover in my book, only with the Hourglass, we're going to have a lot of discussion. We'll cover a wide range of topics and feature a host of interesting guests and experts who can speak to every aspect of divorce. We will cover everything from what triggers a divorce, how to navigate through one, how to move on from one, all productively. Our guests are going to include couples, divorcees, children of divorced parents, their parents. We also have scheduled judges and mediators who hear divorce cases. We're going to talk to grief counselors, HR directors, those who are subject to dealing with traumatized workers. And we're certainly going to have therapists, teachers, spiritual advisors, in-laws of divorced couples, and even reporters and editors who cover the many topics of divorce. Our key question will be to ask, what was the most valuable lesson you learned as you went through your divorce? Keep in mind, moving on is the whole idea behind this show. Sure, maybe there are other divorce shows, but this is where I think the Hourglass is different. We're going to focus a lot on time. Time is one of life's most precious commodities. We'll talk about how much of it you already spent on your divorce. We're going to talk about how much time you should spend on it. Most importantly, we're going to cover how much time you may have wasted in a state of passive longing or mired in protracted divorce battles. By the way, I just want to mention that because I was a former practicing psychologist and now a family law attorney, these are not the only credentials that make me an expert on the subject of divorce and the complexities and problems associated with it. I myself have lived it. I've been divorced, so the wisdom I impart will come from others, yes, but also from my firsthand experience. The first issue I want to discuss in today's show, as I mentioned, is time. How much time you've already spent on your divorce, and how much more time you're willing to spend to get the divorce behind you. How much time have you wasted fighting with your ex over issues like assets and money and spousal and child support, and of course, custody? To further prepare you for this first 4-part series, and so that you can plan your calendar over the next few weeks, looking ahead at the following 3 episodes, here's what I'll cover. Today, I've already given you the rundown. Episode 2 is going to be Moving On Emotionally. We have some great experts on deck for that show. Don't miss it. We will also interview Shauna Fay, the mother of one of our guests today, to see how she worked through her own difficulties trying to co-parent with her ex, and also how she handled the grief of it all. Her story will likely resonate with many of you, and she has great advice. Episode 3 is Moving On Financially, and boy, are we going to have some incredible guests on that show. We will have Jeff Williams, who writes articles on finance for major top-tier publications. He'll talk to us about trends. We'll also have Simon Singer, one of the country's top financial advisors. And in episode 4, we'll talk about your social life, how to redesign it so it's comfortable and fulfilling for you as we move forward with your new life. We'll have Katie Chen, a matchmaker, and also Susan Howington, who runs a company that helps people reinvent their workplace and personal social circles. Now, as you start off on this journey with me, and with those I will have on the show, as we think about time, let's begin to see if yours is being well spent. To help track that, you might want to get yourself an hourglass, which, and I'm reading from Merriam-Webster's now, quote, "An hourglass is often depicted as a symbol that human existence is fleeting and that the sands of time will run out for every human life." So, one thing I don't want you to do is to let your divorce consume you, rob you of time better spent, no matter what divorce phase you're in. An eye on the hourglass will make you more aware of time better spent. Let's get started then, shall we? Okay, now, let me speak to those of you who are thinking about divorce. Here's your quiz. Jot down your answers. Number 1, how long have you been preparing for your divorce? Number 2, are you sure you want to go through with it? Number 3, what is your concrete plan for starting the divorce process? Number 4, if anything is stopping you, what is it? Your answers are going to get you started in the moving on process. As I mentioned, It Takes Time will be a recurring segment on our show, where we're going to feature a guest who will offer advice on how to move through some aspects of the divorce process. And it starts with the realization that the relationship is over. That relationship goes hand in hand with the beginning of the grief process. First on our show is renowned health psychologist Gretchen Kubacky, founder of PCOS Wellness, author of the PCOS Mood Cure, Your Guide to Ending the Emotional Roller Coaster. Dr. Kubacky has also written Moving Through Grief, Proven Techniques for Finding Your Way After Any Loss. Dr. Kubacky, I think it's fitting to start by helping our listeners begin to address how we handle the grief associated with divorce. Let's start with what to do about those initial feelings of tremendous loss, whether your divorce is civil or not.
Yeah, any divorce is going to be full of grief at a variety of stages and points in the divorce process, whether it is the contemplation of the divorce, going through the actual divorce proceedings, or when it's over, because it's not really over. You have to work through the grief.
And in your book, you talk about 4 different stages of grief. How do they apply to the divorcing person?
Sure. Most of us are familiar with the stages of grief as they apply to death. So we talk about denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. In divorce, I look at it more as a compressed sort of thing. It can take any amount of time. You could reach a point where you are over it completely. You've done your grieving before you even get to the point of sitting down with a lawyer to talk about the divorce. But for most people, it's going to come in terms of kind of a pre-grieving sort of thing where you are thinking, wow, this means a lot of loss. My life is going to radically change. May also have a little glimmer of hope that life is going to change for the better. Then when you start the process of divorcing, you will go through some of the things where you're sort of numb and just dealing with the practical realities of life. You know, who gets the kids to school? How are we going to handle bank accounts? Who gets to keep the house? Those sorts of things. Not so much the emotional stuff, because you have to tamp down the emotional part in order to keep going through the process.
Right.
Third stage would be actually getting into reorganizing your life, thinking about what you want it to look like after the divorce, and deciding what does my optimal life look like. Along the way, there's going to be a lot of tears for the time that was lost. And then finally, we have moving into this period of regeneration, reactivation, re-engagement fully with life, and really some little bits and pieces of the grief will still pop through even when you're excited about getting to go out and live your new life. But it's a process and it takes time.
Absolutely. When I went through my divorce, I had come to the realization this has to end. I'd set it all up. I sat down with my then wife and we agreed very quickly what we were going to do. And I didn't start feeling sad about it until the first night I was alone in the house without the kids. I suddenly looked around and said, what's going on here?
Yeah, there can be some real shock associated with it, even if you're the one who initiated the divorce. It's that realization, whoa, this is real, this is happening. I am going to be a single person again. My life will be very much different than it has been as a married person.
Yeah. I'm most interested in the 4th stage, the sort of moving on. What kinds of tips and techniques can you offer to people once they get through some of these stages and get ready to move on with the rest of their life?
Sure. Moving on, I think, is important to look at in a context of what are your values in life? What do you actually want to be doing with the time that you have left on this planet? So it might be values around family, religion, creativity, the environment, education, financial well-being, any of those things that may have been affected by your divorce or things that you may have set aside in the interests of the marriage. It's now time to tend to those things, to create goals that are associated with the values that you personally hold, not the ones you held as a couple,
right,
but your own goals, and to start setting up goals and deadlines to meet those goals so that you can feel like you're actively moving forward and that you have got a life that you really love so that you're fully engaged in that.
You know, a big topic on the hourglass is time and how people are affected by time, how they manage their time. Is there any specific amount of time that the grieving process should take for someone getting divorced, or is it person to person, case by case?
It's really person to person, case by case. When we look at grief, a lot of times we talk about a 1-year process. So we're going through all of the experiences of a year, the cycles of holidays, anniversaries, birthdays, Father's Day, Mother's Day, that sort of thing as markers where different little bits of grief may arise in those moments, missing the person, even if you hate them at that point. Yeah. There is really no set time. I think it's appropriate to seek counseling if you are going beyond a couple of years in terms of feeling really grieving to the point that you're depressed. And that is something, though, where you can take your time. You can try to rush through it, but the feelings are still going to come up when the feelings come up. So know that it is a process. It's also, like any other form of grief, it's a nonlinear process. We'd like to think that it's straight through. You go from the bottom up to the top. It's really more like that. Right. You know, it's not what you want to think that it is.
Sure. And do people sometimes get stuck in different stages and they just can't seem to move on?
Yes, people do definitely get stuck in different stages. Denial is one of the stages where people may get stuck. And the longer the marriage is, the likelier they are to be stuck in a bit of denial, especially if they were in a marriage that was low on communication and they simply didn't talk about it. And then all of a sudden we've been married for 30 years and now we're getting divorced. Right. That is a place where people often get stuck. The anger is also something where there can be a lot of stuckness, especially if it's multi-layered. If there was infidelity that was involved or some sort of financial betrayal or that sort of thing, it can lead to a lot of repressed anger popping out, things where the person had to just deal with things as they were. Yeah. And now 5, 10, 20 years later, wow, are they angry? So depression also can be a stuck point, but I would say it is less so of a stuck point.
Yeah. And if you were advising someone who's stuck at any of those points, and the advice is probably going to be, you've got to get into therapy. What do you have any advice on how to find a good therapist for you, for that person?
Yes. When you're looking for a good therapist, you want to look for somebody who has expertise in grief, if that is what you think you are most dealing with. And any loss of a significant relationship is going to produce grief. Looking for somebody that you can get on the phone for a few minutes, talk to them, see if you feel comfortable with them. Yeah. Credentials are less important in terms of, do they have certificates? Of course, you want somebody with a license, right. But you're more looking for somebody who seems to have some sort of an understanding of the fact that your grief is real, and even if horrible things happened in the marriage, you might still be grieving the marriage. You might be grieving the person you were, the time that you lost, or many other things. So finding that person, you want to go online and look, put in some search terms that seem relevant. So something like psychologist, grief therapy, divorce therapy, marriage therapy. So people who are trained in marriage and family therapy may be good choices aside from a psychologist like me, because they have specific training in the family systems issues that are relevant to divorce.
Now, Gretchen, do you have any sort of tips or techniques for people to move through the process, aside from the obvious advice of going to a therapist?
Yes, a couple of things. And these are specific to anger, and these are kind of fun also. Mm-hmm. I give you permission to have all of the anger, right, and to really let it out, but choose to let it out in a safe way. Do something fun with it where you might end up actually laughing or giggling, mm-hmm, or saying, I can't believe I just did that. It is great to go to something like one of the safe sanctioned axe throwing places and and imagine your ex on the other side of it, or your soon-to-be ex on the other side of it. There are some places that do that sort of thing where you break dishes, and it's so satisfying to write the name of the person you're angry with and then shatter that plate, right? Also, you could do something like, if you are feeling sorrowful, then writing a letter to whomever needs to hear this. It's an unsent letter, though, so feel free to use all of the expletives, blame, don't worry about writing it clearly, succinctly, with proper punctuation, just spew everything out. And that'll really help. And then you can burn it up or lock it in a box or whatever you want to do with it, but get it out of your body and it will help you move forward emotionally.
Yeah, that's something I did. I wrote a letter and then I had a little ceremony where I burned it and just let it go. And it was very meaningful to me.
Yeah, there's something really cathartic about burning the written material. It's literally, we have the symbolism in our minds about endings of things happening when there is fire.
Yeah.
But fire also always comes with it rebirth, right? We think of the phoenix rising from the ashes. Also thinking of the fact that when a forest burns down, that clearing makes space for new growth, new beauty comes out of that.
Absolutely. You've brought up so many topics, so many points that I think are going to be very helpful to our audience. I've got to have you back in the future to go more in depth on some of these things. But thanks so much for coming on with us today.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Our next guest is a prestigious member of the media, Yitzi Weiner, editor of Authority magazine. We're going to spend some time with him via Zoom. Now, Yitzi, tell us about Authority magazine and how reading the content in your publication can help our audience of people getting divorced, coming through divorce, or on the other end.
Well, David, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's an honor, and I love being in partnership with people that are bringing positivity to the world like you are. So I guess a bit of a background about what I do and then why I'm doing what I'm doing. So my background is I'm a trained rabbi. I've been a rabbi for 15 years, but the way I always describe it is that being a rabbi is very rewarding, but not always financially rewarding. So as my family grew, my wife and I, it was difficult to make ends meet. And so around the same time, I was invited. I was a writer for Huffington Post. I was invited to be a writer for Huffington Post. I've always been a writer ever since 10th grade. I had a teacher, Mr. Goldenberg. He saw my writing talent, and he always encouraged me and pushed me to pursue that. So even though I was a rabbi, I was always doing a lot of writing. I've written books, and so I was a writer for Huffington Post, and I was doing a beat, not unlike what I do now. Basically, I was interviewing prominent people, celebrities, leaders in business or technology, and the main theme was how these people are using their large platforms to bring positivity to the world, to make a social impact.
Yeah.
And so shortly afterwards, Arianna Huffington herself, she invited me. She's starting a new platform called Thrive Global. So then I switched from Huffington Post to her new platform, Thrive Global. Initially, Thrive Global was on the Medium platform. So yeah, I was doing that for a while, and I still do that. But I realized, I realized using the Medium platform, and through my whole experience of writing, that I had the opportunity. There was a niche that I could fill, and with my wife's encouragement, we created Authority magazine, and that was in 2017. And today, a few years later, we're very blessed that Authority magazine is the largest of Medium's publications, and perhaps even without exaggeration, and I may be mistaken, but may even be the largest repository of interviews in the world. We have we're coming close to 100,000 interviews, and so we're very blessed. I have a great team, and I'm excited about what we're doing. So to answer your question, we have a series on how to survive and 5 things you need to know in order to survive and thrive during a divorce. We have a great writer, Alyssa Penitz. She's interviewed hundreds of either divorce lawyers like yourself, or lawyers like yourself, or therapists or counselors or other people that are going through it, experts about what people should do to best thrive during a divorce and how to put their life together. So while I'm not personally the author of that series, our platform, we have a great series about that. Maybe we have like 100 or 200 articles on that topic. So I'd invite your listeners to read that. I think they'll find it very uplifting and meaningful.
That's great. It's, when I got divorced now 13 years ago, I was looking for publications that would help me move on from my divorce. I couldn't find them, and I couldn't find things that were positive. I ended up writing my own book about it called Moving On, but certainly having a positive view while you're going through divorce can be helpful. What more can you tell our viewers about just trying to stay positive no matter what life throws at you?
So sure, whenever I say it's easier said than done, it's not easy, not an easy thing. So I'll tell you from my own experience. So we all go through ups and downs. While I'm very blessed that I'm married and I've been married for 20 years, my parents did get divorced. I grew up in a broken family, and it was a messy divorce, sadly. So whenever I hear people getting divorced or I hear stories of people getting divorced, I actually have like a visceral, like a stomach ache, or like I feel a little nauseous, because it triggers my experiences when I was 10, 11, 12. So I feel very connected to it. In terms of what you should do to be positive, so what I do is number one, I this is what I do, and this is not for everybody, but number one, to exercise. Exercise is really a great exercise. Fills you with endorphins, whether it's going to the gym or taking a jog outside, or even in your house doing doing like just cardio in your house, but just doing something to exercise. It really just fills you with endorphins, and it really makes you feel better. Number two, another thing is simply just like taking a nap. Sometimes taking a nap lets your brain just stop that replay, that replay of that replay.
Yeah.
Those are two simple things, but there's something that I could share. If you have a few minutes, I can share from my rabbinic background. So mnemonic is a mask, M-A-S-K, mask, and I'll explain why it's called mask. So basically, these are 4 principles on how to stop feeling bad about yourself and how to feel more positive. So M stands for mindfulness. Mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Mindfulness means that often we focus on what other people have, or focus on what's happening tomorrow or what happened yesterday, but we're not focused on the present. Right now, in the present, usually things are okay. We're alive. We're healthy. We have many blessings. Yeah. Number one is just stop thinking about what happened yesterday or tomorrow or other people. Just focus on you in the moment. That's number one, mindfulness. Just be in the present. A is appreciation. This is again, it's almost a cliche, but it's so cliche because it's so important and it's so apparent. When you buy a new car, you're excited. You buy a new house, you're all excited. But usually that euphoria lasts 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Eventually it goes away. What changed? You still have that same house, the same car. What changed really is the appreciation of it. When you first buy, you really appreciate it. But when you have it for a few weeks and you no longer appreciate its newness. But if we can just appreciate that, just feel appreciation for it, feel gratitude for it. Imagine what life would be if that car was smashed or that house was damaged. Imagine how you'd feel, but it's not. You have that. If you re-access that appreciation, it's almost like a happiness Midas touch. Like Midas touch was everything turned to gold. If you could appreciate everything that you have, so you turn that into happiness. Everything you touch can be turned into happiness. Just appreciate the blessings, your family, your loved ones, possessions, your health. I just yesterday I had this thought in my head that the tedious chores that sometimes we have to do, someone out there is praying for. Yesterday I had dirt on my suit and I was cleaning it off, and I was thinking, oh, that's so annoying. Then I was thinking, someone out there is desperately praying for a child. They would love to be able to clean their suit from some dirt that their children made. So that's appreciation. That's A, and S is simplicity. If we pursue, simplicity means we have to in life. We have to pursue to meet our needs. But if we pursue beyond our needs, we're never going to be satisfied, because there's always going to be more. There's an infinite threshold. Meeting our needs is a finite threshold. It may be hard, it may not easy to pay the bills, but at least that's a finite threshold. But if we're working to be beyond what we need, if we're just pursuing wealth beyond our need, we're never ever going to be satisfied. Right. And simplicity is just to appreciate. To appreciate just appreciate simplicity. To appreciate what we have, appreciate simplicity, and so that's S. And finally, is K is kindness. One of the greatest things to make you feel good is to make another person feel good.
Yeah.
When you're not happy, if you make someone else feel happy, it makes you happy, because you're becoming a better. When you do that, you're becoming a more polished, more refined person. and that makes us feel happy. So that's MASK, mindfulness, appreciation, simplicity, kindness. Now, what's the idea of mask? So this is the final thing, the idea of a happiness mask. I want to tell you a parable. It's
Right.
not a true story, it's a parable. Parables like this. There was once a king and queen, and they had a child. Sadly, the child was born with a very deformed face. Very deformed face. And they were devastated. So they had an idea. They put out a call across their kingdom that they're going to have a contest for whichever artisan can design a lifelike mask.
Yeah.
That person will win a million golden coins. So they had this contest, and many people applied, and they found one artist, and they chose his design for the mask. And then that mask became this young prince's face. So he put on the mask, he wore it, 2 years old, 3 years old, 20 years old. Eventually he's 21, 22 years old, and he's looking, he wants to get married, he wants to have a relationship. So he's introduced to he meets this beautiful princess, and they're dating, and they're having a close relationship, and they want to build a life together. So before he proposes to her, he says, I'd like to invite you on like a trip on the lake, a boat trip on the lake. So they went on the lake on a boat, and he said, my dear, as you know, we like each other, and I want you to spend the rest of your life with me. But before I propose to you, I want you to know one thing. You see this face that I have? It's not really my face. It's not really my face. And he peels off the mask, and he expects to hear the shock of horror. But the princess says, you look wonderful. You look the same way you always look. And he peered over the edge of the boat, and he saw his reflection, and he realized that his hideous face molded into the mask, and that became his face.
Right.
The years, but putting on that mask, that became his face. So the idea is, the idea is like this. This is an idea from William James, from the psychologist William James. He says that we're not in control of our emotions, but we are in control of our actions, and our actions do control our emotions. So if we're not happy, but if we act happy, we act as if we were happy, meaning you sing a song like we're happy. You walk with a positive, like a confident step as if you're happy. Do what you'd be doing if you were happy. That makes you feel happy. Acting the way you're happy makes you feel happy, and that's true for almost all things. If you're not patient, but you want to become patient, just pretend as if act as if you're patient. You become more patient. The point is that if we put on the mask, that will eventually shame us. So those are the 5 things: mask, put on the mask, mindfulness, appreciation, simplicity, and kindness. Those are, from my experience, those are some tips that we could do to become more positive and more, when we're going through a hard time. Those are some things we could do to put things in a better trajectory.
Yeah, honestly, that's an amazing way to summarize it. You brought together all sorts of things I learned when I was a psych graduate student, things I worked with people when I was a psychologist, things I'm telling them these days as a family law attorney, and using the S, you simplified it in an easy way to remember. I'm going to use it. I hope our viewers and listeners appreciate it as well. And the other thing I have to point out is you mentioned taking a nap. I'm going to make sure that my wife views this episode. I take a nap every day for 20 minutes just to clear my head so I can go through the rest of the day. And she always says, why do you have to take a nap? I'm going to point her to this and to your advice, Yitzi. Thanks so much for being on today.
It was an honor, David. Really, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Our next guest is someone I've been looking forward to chatting with all day. His name's Max Fay. Max is 14 years old and lives with his mom, Shauna, who will be joining us on our next show. Max likes comedy and video games, and he's also had his fair share of dealing with parents who didn't stay together. He's worked through some pretty difficult times with his biological father's issues. In fact, Max doesn't see his father, and he's going to tell us a little bit about this. The first thing I want to ask Max is this: how do you manage on a day-to-day basis, given the fact that you've lost contact with your father?
That's a good question. It's been about 2 or 3 years now since I've seen him, and what really helps is, trying to keep my spirits up by playing video games, listening to music, working on, personal projects, really. Making video games is a really good way to de-stress for me.
Great. And have you experienced, when I used to teach developmental psychology, you talk about when kids get to be 13, 14, 15 years old, they start moving away from their parents and moving into a social group of their friends. How have you found that friends can help you?
Yes, definitely. it's a great way to kind of get your mind off of things. Every Friday, me and my friends we get together and we play video games, Dungeons and Dragons, and we just talk about our weeks. It's actually great that we have this. I'm homeschooled and they are not, so.
Right. Yeah, so it's important for you to keep in touch with them on a weekly basis, I bet.
Yeah.
By the way, what kind of video games are at the top of your list these days?
Personally, mainly just games that kind of let you build. One of them is a great way to de-stress. It's Fallout 4. It's a game where you kind of go around a post-apocalyptic world and you try to rebuild it.
Oh, great. And then, a big theme of this show is people moving on from any sort of trauma that they've dealt with, whether it's divorce or having parents who aren't together. Do you have any tips or techniques for other kids who are out in our audience who may be just starting to go through this? What did you find most helpful for you to move through your parents not being together anymore?
Well, I think what's really important is to find a routine that makes you happy. Whether that be a show that you like watching that makes you feel safe, or whether that be a video game or a personal hobby that can really get your mind off of things. That's personally what really helped me.
Now, Max, you talked about going through some difficult times with your parents not being together anymore. Can you give us some more of the background, some more of the circumstances? What happened in your situation? How old were you? What are some of the feelings you were first feeling when your parents didn't live together anymore?
They were actually never together by the time I was born. They'd only been together for about a year, I believe, a year or two. And then they had me, and then they broke up. My mom was living with her mother for a while, and then we moved to Long Beach and lived in an apartment. And I would continuously see him every weekend. And that was about as much as I saw him.
Okay, and so this is all you've known is your parents not living together and going back and forth between your mother and father.
Right. It used to be, I'd see my mom every day, and then every other weekend I would see him. And since they were never together, it led to flexibility with the whole situation of seeing me.
Right, and so at what point did visiting with your father start not feeling good for you?
Right about at the end when I stopped seeing him. You see, he was an alcoholic, and it really just, over time, it got worse and worse, to the points where some days he would just stay in, just sleep all day, and I'd just have to eat granola bars until my mom came.
Wow, that's rough. And what I understand about it is part of the deal with dealing with an alcoholic in your family is never knowing what to expect from them. Did you experience any of those problems?
Yes, I remember we went on a road trip, and he went into a bar, and he left me outside with the bouncer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had a lot of bad situations that way. And at some point, did you just decide, I can't see this person anymore, or did someone make that decision for you?
It was me. I came up with that decision. It started with being in school therapy, and then it led up to going to regular therapy, which really helped. And at a certain point, something happened that just made me go, you know what? My therapist is right, I can't see him anymore. So when they asked me, do you want to continue to see him? I said, no, I don't want to see him anymore.
When you said that, did you feel like people were listening to you and willing to help you out with the decision that you would come to?
Yes.
And who were those significant people in your life at that time?
My mother, my stepfather, and my therapist.
More about therapy. When did you start going to therapy, and how did therapy change from then until the most recent time you were in therapy?
That's a good question. I started around, I'd like to say December of 2019. Mm-hmm. And it started out, and I was in denial at the time. I was like, no, he's really a good dad. He just likes to roughhouse with me. And then it led to me kind of realizing, no, this isn't just roughhousing. He is abusing me.
Yeah.
And then most recently, I think it's really led to me being going from a shell of a person to becoming my own person, just a rebirth, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know this is tough to talk about. I appreciate especially you sharing it with us and our viewers, because I bet there are a lot of other children out there around your age who may be feeling like they're the only people dealing with it, or they're the only people who are having trouble. Do you have any message for all the kids out there?
Hang in there. It's going to be tough in the beginning. I know it was for me. Some things they're going to do is, it's just, sometimes you have to face reality and just accept that sometimes a person isn't who you think they are, but you're going to get through this, and it's hard to say, but it's just, it's difficult getting through this, but you're going to get through this, and you're going to be a better person when you come out of this.
That's great information, great wisdom. I think a lot of kids out there are going to be helped by what you talk about. But before we go, have you used comedy to help you through any of the hard times that you've been through?
Yes, actually, a lot. Right when when I started going to therapy, I started going to an improv group, and that really helped me make new connections, make new friends. It let me focus on something that can just make you laugh in such a stressful time.
And did you learn from improv anything about staying in the moment and not looking too far into the future or too far into the past?
Yeah, in improv, you can't really predict what someone's going to say because it's all on the spot. So it just really makes you think about staying in the current moment and just not worrying about the future.
Great. Thanks so much for coming in today. I'm going to look forward to talking to you more in future episodes to go a little bit more in depth with what it feels like to be a 13 or 14-year-old going through either a divorce or parents separating. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Before we sign off today, let's take a look at a regular segment we plan to feature on every show. A segment that brings a bit of levity through humor to what could otherwise be a dire subject. We turn now to our Time Out segment with one of our stand-up comics, Tommy Pederson, who's also actually a family law attorney. Welcome to Time Out, Tommy.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I have a practice in Orange County, Pederson and Chung. I do family law. My partner does immigration. And before that, I practiced family law for about 5 years as a solo.
Okay, and do you do anything to keep things light?
Well, I do stand-up comedy. I've been doing that, as far back as I can remember. My first grade teacher was complaining about it.
Right. That's great. And are you married?
Happily married for 5 months. I guess we'll keep going.
Right, great. And I'm going to give you a sentence, and I want you to complete it for me. The thing I fear most about getting divorced is...
I think splitting up the passwords for our online streaming accounts. We've managed to accrue almost no community property other than these passwords at this point. I've been sharing them recently with some of my new in-laws. My wife had subscribed to Disney Plus, while her brother also had Disney Plus, but his came packaged with ESPN Plus, which I had already purchased as an upgrade to my Sling account, and I shared that password with my mother-in-law in exchange for her Showtime password. And it turned out we both had HBO Max, but she had subscribed on accident because the show she wanted was on Apple TV. So we subscribed to Apple TV and we threw in Hulu because we wanted to stick it to the cable companies, right? And well, for some reason she had Peacock and I had Peacock, and I don't know why we subscribed to Peacock to begin with. Then we ended up giving my brother-in-law my YouTube Premium password, but he screwed up the algorithm. And but at this point, the financial entanglements are so big. If my marriage ever splits up, we're going to take down an entire sector of the U.S. economy.
Now that's something I've never thought about, and in 25 years as a divorce lawyer, we've never had to split up passwords, but I'm sure it's right around the corner. Thanks so much for being on with us today, Tommy.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, viewers, now on a more serious note. In signing off, I want to leave you with something to think about. I'm going to throw some song ideas at you at the end of each of our episodes that make you more conscious of the value of time. This episode I've chosen Seasons of Love, Jonathan Larson's song from his beautiful Broadway score to the musical Rent. After you listen to the words, ask yourself about the 525,600 minutes. That's how many are in every year. Think about how you spent them last year. How are you spending them this year? And how do you intend to spend those minutes a year from now? And remember, if you're struggling with your divorce, take some deep breaths. I promise you, you'll get through it. But most of all, remember to spend your time wisely.